Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Form Simplicity training. We will be recording this, so if you have any questions or comments, you can add that into the chat. And at the end or during, I'll be questioning Jennifer if there's any questions, and she'll bring up your questions or comments, okay? We are first going to, go into, and I did it again. Okay. Here we go. Okay, we're seeing that now, Jennifer, correct? Okay. We went into the MiamiRE.com, the MiamiRealtors.com, the Miami board. There are two ways you can enter into the Form Simplicity with the Florida Realtors packages and the exact packages that I have made up for all of you. So the easiest way, because the Form Simplicity with the FloridaRealtors.org, there's a separate login than your Miami board or Fort Lauderdale board access. So the easiest way is to go into the MiamiRE.com and go into the Miami Gateway here and double click on that, as if you were going on to Matrix. So we're going to go ahead and log myself in. Okay, now I'm logged into the Miami RE, and now I want to go into our CoreLogic Matrix. And the reason why I'm going into that is because if we need to do something in the MLS, pull up out our MLS sheet that we will be placing and doing a transaction with. And it just makes it a lot easier to not have the second login to go into the Form Simplicity. We go to here to external links. Okay, we scroll down and here's our external links for Form Simplicity right here. So we click on this and this logs us automatically in through the external links. Okay, so now when you're starting a transaction, you have pulled the MLS, you have shown the property, and the buyer is very interested in making the offer. So we are going to start a new transaction. The two important things before you start the transaction is to make sure you highlight the MLS number, the folio number, and any content in the MLS of maybe something that's excluded, or if there was something that the buyer that wanted to make sure stays with the property, because we'll want to add that to the contract when we're going through this. So we are going to go ahead and start a new transaction. I picked this active listing that we have here, and I'm going to name it the property street name. And by doing that, you really can't make a mistake. Even though, say, this buyer is an investor, I would not, address it to a transaction name. I would use the address. And if you wanted to go ahead and put the buyer's last name there, you can do that. Because say if Jennifer Fisher was purchasing multiple properties, you have the address, which is the most important thing, and then you have the buyer's last name. I usually would recommend that. It is a residential, and this is going to be for a purchase for today's training. And then you'll notice down below, you will notice my created by Maryanne Nixon Maryanne. You'll see all of my packages come up first because I put the A. So that way you can identify quickly using my packages, because I have special wording in the contracts, and I always keep them updated so you don't have to. So we're going to be making this transaction with the Florida Realtors as is FAR bar. And we are going to go ahead and hit the bottom right corner to create a transaction. Now, what it's doing now is just pulling in all the contracts and disclosures and company paperwork that you would have to have for this property. And the first thing that we're going to want to do is go right here is to import property data. Okay, so now we have on our MLS sheet the MLS number and the tax folio. We would first start out by doing the MLS number. In this case, it's A111440045. And then we're going to say, yes, import that data. And what it's going to do from the MLS, it's going to take all the MLS information that Form Simplicity knows where to put it inside the contracts, and it will start loading that information up. And from the MLS, it will give the selling listing agent, the listing company, and so forth. So that's also importing data into our contracts. Then we go back into the import data again. And this time from the MLS, we do the tax search. So we hit there. Very important thing to do first is to remember to go to your county where the property is located. If you do the parcel ID also means folio number. If you do that and you don't have the right county and nothing comes up, that was where your problem is usually, because you didn't select the correct county. So I'm going to put our tax folio in. It's 5041 3402 0231. And then we say, please find that data. Okay, and it did. And we select it. It is the correct information. We say save information to transaction, just like we did with the MLS. And we hit OK, continue. Okay, so now we've completed those two property details that will give us a lot of information and do automatic pull-ins for our contract that we'll be adding information into later. The second thing after you do that first step by adding the MLS and the tax roll, we want to go down to transaction participants, because this will allow us to put information about all the details about the seller's parties and all the details about the buyer's parties. In this case, it already knows that the seller is Denise A. Johns, okay? With that being said, because we do have the buyer, the Form Simplicity doesn't know who our buyer is. So this is where we go in and we start adding information, and all this information then will go automatically into our contracts. So we put the buyer's name like Jennifer Fisher. We go ahead and do Jennifer's email. Okay. Now, if we wanted to put her home number, her work number, her cell number, all this information, that will save in there as well. And this training, we'll just go ahead and do the email. Okay, so we saved that. So now it's knowing that it's Jennifer Fisher as the buyer, and it's knowing that Denise A. Johns is the seller, and it already has those embedded into the contracts and additional addendums, anything that are in the forms part of this transaction. Now, other thing that we can do with this, we can also put the brokerage name. And we can save that to the buyer's transaction. We can also even put, which is important, is agent, who the agent was, okay? And then we could put myself in as of right now. And then we would also want to put in my information as far as the email address, okay? That way, when we're working on a transaction, we can always go back, and if you're going into an e-sign session, which we're not going to do that today, that will be a separate recording, all the information, the parties involved, the email addresses and everything, when you're starting your e-sign and doing your e-sign, all that data is also brought into the e-sign session, so you don't have to sit there and fill out over and over again the email addresses and so forth, okay? Once you've completed all the participants, in this case, we're working with the buyer, then we're going to go back up to the as-is contract and start working on the details of the contract of the property and what she wants to make her offer with. As you notice, the seller's name and the buyer's name is there because we went to that transaction participants and we added all that information. So now everywhere throughout any forms in Form Simplicity, those names will be in the seller and buyer areas. Now it also knows the street address and the property legal description because we put in the tax roll information, okay? The one thing I do add to our contracts, that's all automatically there. That's why I always tell you all to use my packages. I added the clothes washer and dryer because that is something that's not in the body of the contract in section D of paragraph 1. Okay, if there was anything in the MLS that was excluded, and in this case, it's the dining room chandelier. Okay, so that's spelled wrong, but it's fine. We went ahead and we excluded that from that. So if there was something for, let's see, something that was attached, because remember now, mounting hardware, that would be for TVs and so forth, those wall mounts are now included, that they must remain there. But in this case, the seller said, no, they want them. So we have to remove it from the contract. The MLS does not guarantee anything. If you do not put it in the contract and it said something in the MLS, it's what's in the contract that matters. The MLS is not warranted over these things. So if it says, please exclude dining room chandelier, or please exclude all TV wall mounts, and you don't put it in the MLS and they're gone when you go to the walkthrough, the seller's going to have to put them back into the property and install them as well. So just make sure if they're wanting to be removed, to put them in there. If the buyer wants it, don't put it in there. Say that it's included. It would be up to the listing agent to say, no, 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 we're going to remove that from there because of the seller's request. So that's a very important detail. Okay, this property is listed at 350, and Jennifer, my buyer, wants to pay 350. It's a hard, rough time out there. And so she wants to make sure she gets in. We also want to make sure that we're getting the pre-qualification or qualification, even better, of this buyer, because we can include that with the contract. We should also always remember to call the listing agent to make sure that it's still available. Why are you going through all this work if it's just that they were missing one initial that they just got and they hadn't had time to get it into the MLS under pending yet? So it's good to call the listing agent regarding that. And also, perhaps there's a special closing date that the seller would like if there was multiple contracts coming in over another offer that came in. So if they said, oh yeah, they definitely really just want to make sure that they're out of the house by March 31st. Well, we're going to make sure that we do a closing date for March 31st on our contract. So in this case, we're going to do the initial deposit 3 days after the effective date. And Jennifer's going to put a good amount in. She wants to secure to make sure that this seller knows that she's serious. So she's putting down 10,000. And then it left in 10 days. Well, we found out also, if we called the listing agent, is there a preference of the inspection period? And the listing agent said, yes, definitely 7. So we may want to go ahead and include the second deposit with that 7 days that we would give the additional deposit, or if left blank, I like to always put in 10, and we can always do this inspections for the 7 days. So it's totally up to the buyers what they're wanting. So we're going to leave it at 10 days, and we're going to say that Jennifer's going to put another $10,000 down. She wants to really show this seller she's serious. Okay. And then for the financing, she's going to go ahead and take a 90% loan on this property. So you would put the 90% there. A lot of people like to put a dollar amount. I don't recommend that, because if there's any changes, you're never going to change what the percentage amount of the loan is. So that can be easily be not another place where somebody would have to initial it and sign. They would just go ahead and maybe if there was a bidding where they would want to change this to 360, they would scratch it out and put 360 on the top. And then this would also change. If it went up another 10,000, this would be changed to on line E of paragraph 2 to 25,000, but it's going to stay the way it is in this. And then today's date is the 19th. So we want an answer by Friday. No, we want a time of acceptance. No, not to get back on the market before the weekend. Then the closing date, we have to go to the next page, page 2, and we go here and we know that the seller wants the 31st and we're going to give them the 31st. Okay. So this is not a contract course. So we're just going to go through. And then remember up here, this is Form Simplicity's control panel. Do not use any of the other things up on the top. Always use for this to close. And we definitely don't want to close before we save. Okay, now if you do hit that close button up here, the circle with the cross in the middle, it will say, whoa, 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 are you sure you want to save this? Because if you don't save it, you will lose everything that all the data that you just put in it. So you want to make sure that you have saved and then hit the close. But if you hit the close, it will warn you. And then the other thing up here, the other tool that you need to use is to print. So your print, save, and close is all right here. So we're going to go ahead and close this out. Okay. Then I have in the forms means that the Florida realtors and the data of the contracts, disclosures, and what our company paid for to have it uploaded into the system. It knows where the signatures and initials need to be done by the buyer or the seller. When you go down into the files, these are mostly our company paperwork, which can be downloaded and they are fillable. This would be information that if you're working in the Form Simplicity, and you're getting ready to send out, for an example, an e-sign, this paperwork, if there's any signatures or dates or initials that have to be done with this paperwork, you would have to drag the signature and drag the information to the form, and then Form Simplicity will know that once it's sent out to the customer, where it has to be identified on these different disclosures and forms, where they have to also click onto a signature, initial, or date. Okay, we'll get that into a Form Simplicity class. Okay, so now that we've completed all of the paperwork and we've gone in and we've said, okay, we know there's a homeowners association, so we want to make sure that we go into our homeowners association right here. That's our addendum. And it is marked B, as you'll see, because we put all that information in. All of it comes up on all the addendums. And we know that we have to enter into Palm Garden Park. And that would be the community that we are using as an example. And then we know from the MLS printout that we want to enter into what the special assessment or assessments are. Special assessments with the association, that would not be the same as special assessments that is in the contract that has to do with county and city assessments. This is only for the homeowners association. And then if it's a condo association, it would be the condo association assessments only. Okay. So in this case, there are none. There is a $350 charge per month that is paid by the homeowner. So that was disclosed in the MLS. And so we disclose it here. Everything else should be left blank, because I'll be very honest with you. The sellers in this transaction should be filling any other additional information out, checking if it's required to be approved and so forth, because You don't know as a buyer's agent what that would be. So by having the seller fill this out, or the listing agent, before the seller initials, and then it gets sent back to you, the buyer should be signing the HOA and the condo association last, because the owner of the property or the listing agent is going to know more information about this disclosure and addendum than the the buyer's agent would, unless you're very familiar with the community. But if there was something that was entered in here as the buyer's agent working with the buyer, and you added something in here and it is not correct, then it's up to the responsibility of the listing agent to remove it, to scratch it out, put the right things in. So it's just best that they fill this out first, and then it gets back to your buyer once they have accepted everything and completely taken care of on the seller's end. Then the buyer would initial this last, and that would be your effective date. Okay. So now that I'm going to show you how this works. If, for example, we didn't save it and I said close, here's the warning. So we want to save and close. So we save that as well. Okay, Jennifer, do we have any questions? No. Now the information up here, like the MLS number, if you put that in, that's just for your information. Okay, the most important thing is the import data. That is where the MLS and the tax roll brings in all the data information from those two outsources into your contracts. Okay, well, this is going to also be in an e-sign session. It's going to go more into detail about, let me see here. Let me pull this up. Down on the bottom, of course, the files, that's where we would have our checklist. And for our checklist, we want to make sure that, as per all the other training, that we're making sure that the buyer's signing all the closing documents and disclosures, as well as the contract. And when that gets fully executed, that gets turned into Marie or Jennifer or Cherry as well too. Now, when you pull these forms up on Form Simplicity that are in the files where they're fillable, you must download them, okay? Once you download them, then you can click on the download on the bottom left corner, and now you can fill them out. Okay, so you'll be able to put all the contact information that we need as the office and the company of everything that's needed. And then of course we have the checklist off to the side. Now, remember 8 through 13, eventually everything has to be signed by this buyer. 1 through 13, everything must be turned in when the contract is executed and it's being turned in, or with any deposits. The only exception would be for the home warranty. If they wanted to talk with Cinch, with Brittany, if they wanted to make sure this is something they really wanted to do, this is something that would be turned in no later than 10 days before the closing date. Okay. So once that's completed, and when you save it, it will save to your transaction, so that you can also print out and turn that in with your sales cover sheet, contract and addendums, and all of the company paperwork, and the MLS printout, and the time period sheets, and the sales cover sheet. So everything 1 through 13 is right there. The things below, as you know, are just to give you, just to give us information that what's in the contract with the time periods, when the first deposit is due, when the second deposit is due. And then we have some additional information down below that, if it's required, if it's a new home construction, you're not going to be doing any contract. You're actually going to get the registration form of the new home construction with the commission fee disclosure, and for the builder's agreement. It takes a while for them, but as long as you have them registered with that new home buyer They will handle the contract with the customer. You will definitely receive a copy, but remember, even though they are walking in to that new homes and they are using that contract, you still have to have your customer buyer sign all the company disclosures 7 through 12. Okay, those still have, all the company paperwork still has to be signed and turned in. The only exception with the new construction, FHA and VA loans is that the 395 brokerage processing commission is company paid. Okay, those are the only 3 exceptions for the 395. The FHA and VA, that's a federal tax break that the company gets, so we oblige to that. And we also, the new construction, basically they're handling the whole contract and they're handling everything from that time of contract to closing. So we are pretty much, you know, not completing all of the normal tasks that are due. So we do, company pays for that buyer not to have to pay that. Okay. All right, so pretty much everything else is questions. Anybody, anything, Jennifer? Okay. So basically with that, that is our Form Simplicity class, Basic 101. The next class that we'll be having will be next Wednesday live, will be Marketing Resource in the Berkshire Hathaway Resource Center. And then from that time until next Wednesday, I will be doing an e-sign class as well. Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you all being here, and make it a great day.